launched an urgent investigation into last night's dramatic events in Basra. British forces had to storm their way into a police station, searching for 2 British soldiers who'd been arrested and then handed over to local militants. The men were apparently members of the SAS, as Gavin Hewitt now reports.
This was the scene after British forces made their dramatic rescue of 2 SAS soldiers, smashed outer buildings and crushed cars outside Basra's central jail. We were on duty, said this police officer, when armoured vehicles smashed the outer walls and fences of the prison. These were the 2 Special Forces soldiers who were rescued. We've disguised their identity. Revealed today some of the equipment they were carrying: weapons, rocket launchers, global positioning equipment. Local television even had the men showing the Arab disguise they were apparently wearing. We learned much more today about what happened. The SAS men were taken to this jail, accused of killing an Iraqi police officer, but this is still unconfirmed. It was when British soldiers were sent to the jail to negotiate their release that they were attacked by a crowd. Although the fighting was dramatic, the British say the crowd numbered just 300. 6 British military officials went inside the police station. Sometime later, there was a serious development. Surveillance revealed that 2 soldiers were about to be taken to another location and handed over to a radical militia. The British officer in charge decided to launch a rescue mission.
I became more concerned about the safety of the 2 soldiers after we received information that they had been handed over to militia elements. As a result, I took the difficult decision to order entry to the Jamia police station.
Armoured vehicles knocked down one of the jail's outer walls and helped the negotiating team escape. The 2 soldiers weren't there. The Iraqi police were persuaded to reveal they'd been taken to a house in Basra city, and another operation was launched to free them. The British believe they were absolutely right, but the Iraqi government was critical and has launched an urgent investigation.
It is a very unfortunate development that the British forces should try to release their soldiers the way it happened. It's very unfortunate.
The streets today have been calm, but what no one can disguise is the breakdown in trust. Some of the police, trained by the British, colluded with the militia and ignored orders from Baghdad to release the British soldiers. The government denies British forces are facing a new challenge. They describe last night's operation as tactical and local. But what it has done is show just how difficult it is handing over security to local forces when a significant number of them are linked with extremists. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News at the Ministry of Defence.
Well, the unrest in Basra has provoked further debate about how long British troops should stay in Iraq. But the Defence Secretary, Dr. John Reid, said that now was not the time to wave the white flag, as he put it. Our correspondent Ben Brown, who went into Basra with British forces during the war, assesses the challenges of the coming months.
We're going at the rear, yeah? The jump here, let's go.
From the day they captured Basra, the British were always keen to show us their softly style of soldiering, wearing soft hats instead of helmets and patrolling Basra on foot. The Shias here hated Saddam, and initially at least, they welcomed the troops who overthrew him. But one man has helped change the atmosphere, the radical Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. His Mahdi army militia is 10,000 strong and fighting to drive British troops out of the country. It's one of several rival Shia militias in and around Basra. If there ever was such a thing as a British honeymoon here, it's over. In recent weeks, there's been a sharp rise in violence and unrest and a wave of attacks that have left several troops and contractors dead. British troops are supposed to control a large swathe of southern Iraq. There are just over 8,000 of them stationed here. Now, part of their problem is that Iran is right next door. Its people also Shia Muslims. The suspicion is that Iran is pouring money, weapons and explosives across this long border and into the hands of southern Iraq's militias. That suspicion has only grown after the election of Iran's new hardline president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Britain's exit strategy has always been to train up the Iraqi police so that one day they could take over from British troops. The trouble is that same police force seems to have been infiltrated by Shia extremists. Some say only about a quarter of the police can be trusted.
If it is the case that the Iraqi police have been infiltrated, that they do side with extremist militants and not with the British Army, then we really do need to be told about this. We need to be told about the scale of the problem, and we need to be told about what our strategy is for dealing with it.
The government says it'll keep on training the police and that will ultimately allow troops to come home. The question is, when?
It would be a disaster to stay there as an occupying force indefinitely, and it would equally be a disaster to wave the white flag and run at the signs of violence from the mob or terrorists.
But the nightmare scenario for Britain is that by training the police force here, they may simply be training their enemy of the future. Ben Brown, BBC News.
Well, let's go live to Basra now and talk to our correspondent there, Caroline Hawley. Caroline joins us tonight by video phone. Caroline, first, I gather that you've seen the 2 British soldiers who were freed last night. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. We were actually on the same British military plane down from Baghdad with them. We assumed they had been in Baghdad for some form of a debriefing. Now, obviously, they didn't want to be identified. One of them was wearing dark glasses, another was wearing a cap low down over his eyes. They certainly didn't want to talk to us, but they did appear well, although one of them had a bandage on one of his arms.
Just had a statement in, Caroline, from the Iraqi National Security Advisor, Dr. Muwafaq al-Rubaiyeh, who says that our security forces, I'm quoting here, our security forces, he says, are penetrated by insurgents. Now, from what you've gathered today from British forces, how concerned are they about these rogue elements, so-called?
They are concerned. I have to tell you that here in Basra, not surprisingly, the British military is trying to play down the significance of the events of yesterday. But certainly I think there is real concern now about the loyalty of the security forces that the British have been training, that the British soldiers are relying on for them to be able to go home. Now, military officials here are saying that it was rogue elements involved, but they don't know how many rogue elements. It seems it was dozens of policemen in that police station at the time. They don't know how big the wider problem is, but they certainly are concerned about it, and it will make it very difficult for British soldiers here to know friend from enemy. That is the real concern.
Caroline Hawley in Basra, thank you very much. 3 of the 4 bombers responsible for the July the 7th bombings in London had carried out a practice run in the week before they struck. Scotland Yard has now released closed-circuit television images showing the men travelling to London to visit their targets, as Margaret Gilmore reports.
It was 9 days, almost to the minute, before their final fatal journey into London. The recce carried out by the Edgware Road bomber Mohammed Siddiq Khan, with Shahzad Tanweer, who detonated the Aldgate device, and the King's Cross bomber Jermaine Lindsay. 2 even carried rucksacks like those used the next week for the actual bombs.
This is quite typical of terrorist methods, to reconnoitre the layout, to check timings, to check security, to check all those things which they would feel in their own mind they needed to get right in order to launch their attack.
It was rush hour when the 3 bombers carried out the dummy run. No one knows why the 4th, the bus bomber, wasn't there. At 8:10, the 3 went into the ticket hall at Luton Station and caught a train to London. At 8:55, they arrived at King's Cross. You can see them walking down the platform and into a corridor. Then they disappeared, turning up 3 hours later at Baker Street Station. At 12:50, they were back at King's Cross, where they boarded a return train to Luton.
Those missing 3 hours could be vital. We want to know what they were doing. Did they meet anybody? Where did they go? Does it give an insight into perhaps something else that they were planning? We just don't know. That's what we need to know, and that's where we need the help of the public.
Next time they made the journey, it was July the 7th itself. Police revealed today in the car they parked at Luton they'd left 2 more unexploded bombs, primed and ready for use, described as the work of an experienced bomb maker. Today's developments tell us this was a chillingly sophisticated group of bombers, careless in leaving clues about themselves, but meticulous in hiding the tracks of others who supported them. Finding those who did give backup is now the priority. The search has taken them to this massive landfill site in West Yorkshire, where they're literally looking for clues in anything thrown away by the bombers. Police believe they must have had support somewhere. Osama bin Laden's second in command, Ayman al-Zawahiri, claims in a new video that support came from Al-Qaeda itself, but police say there's no proof of this. There's little doubt now, though, the London bombs were the result of calculated planning over a long period of time. The question, how much was planned here and how much abroad? Margaret Gilmore, BBC News.
There's another hurricane heading for America's Gulf Coast. Hurricane Rita is gathering strength, and tens of thousands of residents have been ordered to leave the Florida Keys. Rita's predicted path would take it to Texas, but there are fears it could hit Louisiana. In New Orleans, plans for residents to return to the city have now been suspended. From there, Claire Marshall reports.
Now,
Yeah, is it possible to get to the house?
unfortunately, not today, ma'am. Due to the mandatory evacuation.
They thought they could come back to start picking up their lives, but the people of New Orleans are being turned away. From the city centre out to the hardest hit suburbs.
You've come all the way back and are now turned away. How do you feel?
Bad, because now I can't go get my pictures for my girlfriend because her mother died. Can't get no pictures for that. Have pictures of my newborn son. Can't get none of that.
This is the reason why Hurricane Rita is looming. The Florida Keys are currently being battered by winds of more than 100 miles an hour. Even if Rita spares New Orleans a direct hit, she could bring enough rainfall to swamp the city once again. The levees are the guardians of New Orleans, but they were severely weakened by Katrina. The east of the city is particularly at risk.
No, the hurricane protection levees are essentially gone. I mean, they are upwards of 80 to 90% destroyed.
Everything possible is being done to build up the defences.
There is a real sense of urgency about the repairs being carried out here now. This is a temporary dam. The hope is that they can make it strong enough to withstand a new storm surge.
As the new threat approaches, the president is back to show his support. It's his 5th visit to this hurricane-hit region. He's finding out just how bad the situation could become. The clean-up of the French Quarter had begun, but as the city empties once more, it'll be a long time before these streets hear the sound of jazz. Claire Marshall, BBC News, New Orleans.
And still to come on tonight's programme. Tesco's bumper profits, critics now say it's a sign of too much power. Charles Kennedy, the Liberal Democrat leader, has accepted criticism from party members that he needs to lead rather than respond. The leadership was again defeated at the conference today when delegates refused to back plans to privatise Royal Mail. And as our political editor Nick Robinson reports from Blackpool, they're also resisting efforts to change the party's image.
Good afternoon, fellow Liberal Democrats.
Spare a thought for Charles Kennedy. It isn't always easy turning your party into a contender for power. This party craves, it hungers for the credibility of a serious party of government. That doesn't just mean dealing with some of the crazier fringes of conference. It means a full-scale argument about exactly what its policy offer should be as well. It's rare for a political leader to invite their party to have a row, but Charles Kennedy insists that it's a debate they simply have to have.
We will only succeed, in my view, if we present ourselves, and that means we have to believe in ourselves as a British government in waiting.
Keep the post office public.
But many in his party are resisting the policy changes he wants to make. Today, a plan to privatise the Royal Mail, presented as the modern way to save post offices, greeted as an old-fashioned betrayal.
I thought we had some clear blue water between us and the other two Tory parties. This muddies the water, it turns it a murky shade of orange.
Hardly the official line, but this is.
We are a party which can take tough decisions, a party of bold vision, a party of government.
The conference did take a tough decision to send the idea back to where it came from for the leadership to think again.
That is very clearly carried.
On tax too, those mocked as the beard and sandal brigade are resisting demands their party shed its tax and spend image. Demands led by the bright young men in suits.
I think there's a huge risk for us in not being sufficiently distinctive from a centralising, monopolistic, high tax, high spending Labour Party under Gordon Brown.
That leaves many, well, unimpressed.
I don't think, frankly, we should try and compete with the Conservatives and New Labour at being right-wing, because they're rather better at it than us.
Charles Kennedy is accused of sitting around while others cut and paste his party's policies. A friend and advisor says he must reinvent himself and lead his party more. And Mr. Kennedy now says he agrees. Nick Robinson, BBC News, Blackpool.
Plans to revalue every home in England for council tax bills have been put off until after the next general election. Ministers say they want to wait for the results of an independent review of council funding. Revaluation would probably have meant higher bills for many households. The Conservatives say the policy is in total disarray. Britain's biggest supermarket, Tesco, has announced another big rise in profits, prompting criticism from some people that it's getting far too powerful. Profits went up 18.7% over the first 6 months of the year. Its market share now stands at 30%, as Rory Catlin-Jones reports.
Hard times on the high street, tell that to Tesco. While its rivals falter, it's flourishing, with sales and profits surging ahead. The only problem is the better it does, the more questions are asked about its dominance. Here in Bicester in Oxfordshire, you get a snapshot of Tesco's power. This fair-sized supermarket on the outskirts of town isn't the only Tesco in Bicester. About a mile away, there's this much smaller version. In the middle of a Bicester housing estate, there's another convenience store. And in the centre of a town with no other major supermarket, there's a Tesco Metro. Now, not every small town has 4 Tescos, but it's certainly true that the company is grabbing an ever larger share of the market. Even Walmart, the world's biggest retailer and owner of Asda, has been saying Tesco's too big. But this morning, the company's boss hit back.
Nobody has a preordained right to expand. In this competitive market, customers have a choice. 90% of the population can choose from 3 supermarkets, and they do choose, and they move from one to the other.
It's suppliers who complain loudest about Tesco's power. This mushroom grower in Yorkshire spoke out after losing a vital contract with the supermarket.
And when you're in a dominant position, you are in a position to then use your influence and dominate the supply base, and do it with a fair degree of impunity.
Back in Bicester, though, most shoppers seemed unconcerned.
You always end up at Tesco's for whatever else you want to buy. There's always something in Tesco's you've got to get.
It'd be nice to have something different for a change, I think. You know, you get a bit bored with the monotonous, always the same.
But Tesco's growth shows no signs of slowing. The next 6 months will see another 73 stores opening across Britain. Rory Catlin-Jones, BBC News, Bicester.
A pioneering conference in Leicester could greatly improve understanding of the lives of Britain's young Muslims. The conference is to send its conclusions and its recommendations to ministers. The event could be the first of many, as Mike Baker explains.
Young Muslims at a religious school in Leicester. Some teenagers spend almost as much time in madrasas as in regular school. It raises issues of identity and integration. Riaz, on the left here, is taking A-levels at a Leicester college. He used to attend madrasas, but now works for British Gas every evening to support himself through to university. He and his friend Saeed hope today will be a chance to express what it means being a young British Muslim, bridging 2 cultures.
Do those Muslims, in inverted commas, that commit these acts think they're good Muslims? Do they?
This conference, funded by government, is a rare opportunity for young Muslims to discuss issues like terrorism in public.
They have no other way to express themselves, and even though terrorism is not logical and it's not the correct way, it's not justified, but it's still their only way of making themselves heard.
There was condemnation of the London bombings, but sympathy with the grievances of Muslims worldwide and a strong sense of being misunderstood and not heard.
All us Muslims have to try harder to defend ourselves, and in defending ourselves it's like people assume that you've actually done something wrong.
Fitting in, it is a bit of a problem after 9/11 and 7/7, but I think if people understand what Islam really teaches us, then hopefully that misunderstanding will be gone.
I am proud to be a young British Muslim, and I mean I think that goes for everybody else, but when media and people portray us in a bad way, then obviously that makes us feel bad.
The day's themes: frustration with media stereotypes, desire for more teaching of Islam in schools, and for dialogue with other communities.
I was in 3 different workshops today, and I noticed quite a lot of people who are really enthusiastic and who are just eager to, get the voice heard. I think if Mr. Blair was here, he would be really proud of these people.
If just one thing has emerged from today's conference, it is that young Muslims don't trust the media and feel unable to influence politics. But given the right platform, they are ready and willing to make their voices heard and to get involved in wider society. Mike Baker, BBC News, Leicester.
The model Kate Moss has been dropped from an advertising campaign for the fashion retailer H&M. The decision follows newspaper allegations that she took cocaine. Initially, H&M announced it would stand by the model, but today it said that using her would be incompatible with the company's anti-drug stance. Simon Wiesenthal has died at the age of 96 after a life dedicated to bringing Nazi war criminals to justice. Among his great achievements was tracking down Adolf Eichmann, one of the main instigators of the final solution. Steven Spielberg, the Hollywood director and close friend, told the 10 o'clock news tonight that Simon Wiesenthal was a noble and selfless man who'd helped preserve the memory of history's greatest crime. James Robbins looks back at his life.
Simon Wiesenthal as an old man back at Mauthausen, the Nazi death camp which he survived, but more than 100,000 others did not. The experience of 4 years in concentration camps so haunted him, he devoted the rest of his life to tracking down those responsible.
This is a warning for the murderers of tomorrow. Maybe they are born today, that they will never rest.
In the camps, Simon Wiesenthal drew what he witnessed. He remembered 91 names of camp officials, and after the war he tracked down more than 70 of them. But Wiesenthal's quest was far larger. He set up the Jewish Documentation Center in Vienna to gather case histories of all the Nazis he believed the Allies weren't bothering to pursue.
In Jerusalem, the trial of Adolf Eichmann begins.
Helping Israel track down Adolf Eichmann was Simon Wiesenthal's most spectacular success. The Israelis kidnapped, tried and executed the man who devised Hitler's final solution, the Holocaust to annihilate the Jews of Europe. Britain's former war crimes investigator remembers Wiesenthal both as friend and campaigner against racism and genocide.
Kind man, good man, and one who had suffered so much himself that he wanted to try to bring to justice the people who'd caused that suffering so that they wouldn't do it to anyone else. I think he was one of the world's mighty heroes.
This is Karl Linnas, just one of over 1,000 war criminals Simon Wiesenthal helped bring to justice. Found in America in 1987, fighting to the last his deportation from New York. And at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles today, their founder is being remembered.
I will remember him as an ordinary person who rose to be an extraordinary person, proving that every human being has in him the potential to rise to greatness.
Simon Wiesenthal, foreseeing his own death, said this: "When we come to the other world and meet the millions of Jews who died, I will say, I didn't forget you."
Simon Wiesenthal, whose death was announced earlier today. We'll be back in a short while with the latest on the day's headlines. Now it's time to join our news teams across the United Kingdom. Bye for now.
Good evening, I'm Carol Bundock. 1 in every 5 vacancies for head teachers is going unfilled. Teaching unions say it comes down to the workload, the responsibilities and the continuing education reforms imposed by the government. But in our region, schools are solving the problem by sharing heads. Andrew Sinclair reports.
So we've got one, yours are jumping, yours are laughing.
If it's Tuesday, it must be Hainford. Judith Elliott-Hunter isn't in charge of just one school, she runs 2.
I divide my time more or less equally between the schools, but prioritising if there's anything special happening, making sure that I'm at each school for a whole day and then some half days, and that I'm at each school for anything special that's happening or if I'm particularly needed.
Hainford First near Norwich is what's known as a partnership school, and Mrs Elliott-Hunter is a partnership head teacher. Her other school is a 5-minute drive away in the next door village.
It's made them much less vulnerable and it's made them remain the centre of their villages, which I think is the most important thing.
But do they get a proper service from a head teacher if you're dividing your time between 2 different schools?
Yeah, they get better than proper service, I think, because instead of splitting myself in 2 and having a teaching commitment and a management commitment, which I had before, it means that I'm doing the same job in 2 different places.
There is twice as much paperwork. She says the key to success is being well organised. There are currently 22 partnership schools in Norfolk. More are planned. Does it work, sharing your head teacher?
Well, I found it has. You know, it's really been quite successful.
She does actually do it quite well, actually. She's always backwards and forwards from one school to another.
We found that by putting schools together, then we can get the benefits of very good headship and leadership, and we can keep schools open close to their local community.
Norfolk was one of the first authorities to introduce partnerships. They've been judged so successful that other parts of the country are now following suit. In Suffolk, they've just started the experiment at 4 schools this term. In rural areas, this could be one of the solutions to the head teacher crisis. Andrew Sinclair, BBC Look East, Norfolk.
More than 40 firefighters went to the scene of a house fire in a village outside Norwich. Crews were called to a thatched cottage in Mulbarton this afternoon. 9 appliances and an aerial platform were deployed. No one was injured, but the fire caused severe damage to the property. Luxury flights to America are being introduced at Stansted Airport. There'll be 2 new services to New York for business and first-class travellers. The business class service will be run by MaxJet Airways, with 1 flight a day costing £600 each way. The controversial musical Jerry Springer the Opera is coming to Southend and Norwich as part of a national tour. There were demonstrations by some Christians when it was broadcast on BBC Two, and it attracted a record 63,000 complaints. Fumes mean fines, at least in one Essex town. Councillors in Braintree are the first in the country to bring in on-the-spot fines for drivers who leave their engines running too long.
Braintree is pretty typical of many market towns. There are many things you can't do, many restrictions, and soon even doing this for too long could land you in trouble.
If it stops everybody and makes them more aware, then that's a good thing, isn't it, surely?
Not being disrespectful, but I think it's a bit of a weak case.
They weren't going to do it when you were processing at the traffic lights, I presume.
No, they're not going that far, but taxis would be included. And on the rank today, signs this could prove a heated debate in more ways than one.
It's a good thing, I suppose, if it's unnecessarily running, but if it's cold, then you need to be warm, don't you? Because that would be, well, hopefully they're allowed to do that anyway, are they?
It's very extreme, but it's the future of our planet that we're looking at, and every little counts. Just by cutting exhaust fumes and pollution in Braintree, if this catches on in our own overcrowded little island, this day Braintree, next day, you know, the world, who knows?
Supporters of the move say there are many major issues on pollution which need to be tackled, but smaller scale problems can't be ignored.
We face a huge range of problems, a lot of them to do with the air and what we're doing to it, putting pollution into the air, and really people have a right to breathe clean air, and that's really at the bottom of what this policy is about and wider policies, and the more we can do to further that, the better.
Today the RAC said it thinks the idea makes sense but believes drivers need greater clarification on how it'll work.
Developers are facing a race against time to complete the new Chapelfield shopping centre in Norwich. The complex has taken 3 years and £275 million to build. It's due to open tomorrow, but today more than 2,000 workmen were still busy.
Naturally, this is the nature of retail, that we get a tremendous amount of activity leading up to the opening, and of course we do have an army of cleaners that are providing that final sparkle for the great opening day.
In football, Norwich City eased into the third round of the Carling Cup tonight. The match finished Norwich 2, Northampton Town 0. Chris Gorham was at Carrow Road.
A goal in each half proved enough for Norwich to go through to round 3 of the Carling Cup. It was by no means comfortable, but the Canaries did enough. Nigel Worthington made 8 changes from the team that beat Ipswich, and they struggled to settle against the spirited Northampton side. Darren Huckabee converted a debatable 33rd minute penalty after he'd been fouled. Huckabee limped out early in the second half, and his replacement Dean Ashton made the game safe with 13 minutes to go. An opportunist strike turning in Jim Brennan's shot. So the result, no surprise, but not as convincing as the scoreline suggests. Norwich City 2, Northampton Town 0.
So to the weather, and it'll be dry and clear overnight with some fog patches developing. Tonight's low 10 Celsius, and tomorrow a fine dry day with possible cloud and warm spells of sunshine. Top temperature 21 degrees Celsius, 70 Fahrenheit. That's it from us now. It's back to Hugh for tonight's closing headlines. Good night.
The main news tonight, the Iraqi government has launched an urgent inquiry into last night's dramatic events in Basra, when British forces stormed a police station searching for 2 soldiers who'd been arrested. The men, members of the SAS, had been handed over to militants before they were rescued. And police have released new images of the July the 7th London bombers, apparently on a kind of practice run for their attack. Newsnight is on BBC Two now with an interview with Iraq's National Security Advisor. But from all of us here on the 10 o'clock team, good night.
Good evening. Well, the nights might be about to get longer than the days, but it helps when the days are filled with warm September sunshine. It really is just the job. There was plenty of sunshine around today, and tomorrow's shaping up pretty well too. For most of us, a few exceptions, and the satellite picture shows where they are. There's a lot of cloud pushing in from the Atlantic, and it's spreading into Northern Ireland now and parts of Scotland. That eventually will bring outbreaks of rain. But even later on tonight, well, you can see those areas of blue just fringing into western parts of Scotland, western parts of Northern Ireland. Initially quite light and patchy rain. Most of us will be dry, broken cloud across many parts of England and Wales. So a sunny start for many. There will be 1 or 2 fog patches across northern England, and especially further southwards across parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the South East. 1 or 2 of those patches are quite thick, and they could well last right the way through the rush hour. A tip for the early morning drive to work. Misty low cloud across many southern parts of England, but the cloud will readily break up, I think, as we go through the morning, and the mist will eventually disperse. The wind's coming up from the south, a light wind, it'll soon warm up. Wales shaping up quite nicely too. Across the Irish Sea, well, that wind rather more of a feature, quite a blustery southerly. A lot of cloud for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Initially quite patchy rain with some brightness to the east of the hills, eastern parts of Scotland around the Moray Firth. I think we'll see some brightness here throughout much of the day. Only very slowly will that rain just edge into western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, eventually turning heavier and more persistent, taking all day though before it reaches Belfast. 1 or 2 showers perhaps around western parts of Wales, southwest England, but most of England and Wales, eastern Scotland, fine, dry and warm. 21, 22 degrees, 72 Fahrenheit, pretty good for this time of year. Cooler in the northwest with the cloud, the wind and the rain, which will stagger its way further eastwards as we go through the night into northwestern fringes of England and Wales, but breaking up, you'll notice, most places becoming dry. Still a lot of cloud across the north and the west through Thursday. Some showery bursts of rain around, still quite a stiff southerly wind. By and large, the further south and east we go across the UK on Thursday, the brighter, drier and warmer the weather will be. Again, 22 degrees in London. The light southerly wind. Enjoy it, it won't last, because by Friday we will see some more persistent and heavy rain pushing right the way across England and Wales, so wet end of the week here. It will brighten up from the northwest, we'll see some sunshine but some blustery showers, and it'll feel chillier than it has done recently. To start the weekend, best of the brightness in the east, eventually more rain will be spreading into many western areas. That's about it from me. I wish you a very good night.
Next here on BBC One, the second part of Derailed. If you like ideas you can put to use, there are different ways to get inspired across all the BBC's digital channels.
There's nothing like it in the world. You can see the potential.
I think that you've got a good product, and I think you're absolutely spot on.
There'll be nothing better than seeing this in the shops. This is the one.
Do you feel more in control?
Yeah, definitely. You've planted the thoughts in my head, and they've just grown, and I've just gone and done it. That's what I've needed.
So what you're saying now is that you get a real buzz from saving?
Yeah, as far as I do. That's brilliant.
Talks to solve the Heathrow dispute are announced. We'll be live at Heathrow for the very latest.
A lot of very anxious passengers, so watch this space.
Hello, I'm Chris. And this is the story of the 3 bears and what happened after Goldilocks broke Baby Bear's chair.
To get information on these or any other BBC digital channels, call 08700 10 10 10.
Hello, lost and found. Ah, you're looking for Britain's lost decade, eh? Right, 1945 to 55. Let's see. Yeah, we've got the last London Olympics when athletes brought their own sandwiches. The secret stories found in the diaries of ordinary people. It's what I write. The kitchen nightmares of a nation on rations. And the remarkable tale of one of Britain's most radical governments.
Elections, says Mr. Attlee.
Oh, yes. All here and ready to watch.
Explore our forgotten years with a month of programmes. The Lost Decade. Find it this October on BBC 4.
This is BBC 1. Now, the second part of tonight's drama telling the story of the Paddington train crash. Derailed.